When you hear the word socialism, what comes to mind? A perfect world where everyone has the same opportunities and wealth? Or do you think of failed regimes, poverty, and oppression? The truth is somewhere in between, and it's more complex than most realize. Did you know that, at its peak, the Soviet Union controlled 1/6 of the world's land but was struggling with shortages of basic goods like bread and toilet paper? Or that North Korea, under its socialist system, has one of the world's most isolated and impoverished populations, despite its promise of equality? But socialism isn't just about government control or failed economies. Some countries have managed to combine socialist ideas with successful market systems, like the Nordic countries. In places like Sweden and Denmark, social welfare programs are thriving, but these countries also feature some of the highest taxes in the world. In this video, we're diving deep into the lessons learned from socialist experiments around the globe. From the massive economic failures of the Soviet Union to the surprising successes in Scandinavian countries, we'll explore the highs, lows, and everything in between. What worked? What didn't? And most importantly, what can we learn for the future? Stay tuned as we break down the surprising truths about socialism, ones that you may have never heard before. Chapter 1: The Utopian Dream, Hope or Hype. Socialism has always been portrayed as a pathway to equality, where every citizen gets access to the same resources, rights, and opportunities. The idea of a utopia where class divides vanish and every person lives in harmony sounds alluring. But, are these ideas realistic or just hype? Throughout history, socialist leaders have promised a system where the wealth of the nation is shared, and no one goes hungry or without healthcare. However, as many socialist experiments show, it's easier to dream of equality than to actually achieve it. For example, in the early 20th century, the Soviet Union was built on the dream of creating a classless society. Lenin's vision was simple: empower the working class and eliminate the rich elite. Yet, after the revolution, the government struggled with economic control and corruption. Even though socialist ideologies emphasize equality, the gap between the ruling class and the workers only grew wider. In Cuba, Fidel Castro promised an equal society, offering universal healthcare and education. To his credit, Cuba boasts one of the highest literacy rates in the world. However, the dream of wealth equality remains elusive. Despite free services, everyday goods remain scarce, and Cubans have limited access to basic freedoms. The average salary in Cuba is around $30 a month. Is that equality or just a different kind of inequality? On the other hand, the Scandinavian model shows that socialist-inspired systems can thrive if they focus on welfare without fully eliminating capitalism. Countries like Sweden and Denmark mix capitalist market economies with robust social safety nets. They rank among the happiest countries in the world, with high-quality healthcare, education, and social services. But even these countries face challenges, like rising taxes and growing public debt. So, does socialism work? Well, it depends on how it's implemented. Some argue that socialism, in theory, is an ideal we should strive for. Others say it's a nice dream that doesn't stand up to the realities of governing a complex society. The road from idealism to practice is never easy, and history has shown that turning a dream into a reality is a tough journey. Chapter 2: The Economic Engine, Revolution or Ruin. When it comes to the economic side of socialism, things get tricky. The basic idea behind socialism is that the state should control major industries and ensure wealth is distributed fairly among the people. But this is where problems often arise. Socialism aims to eradicate private ownership, which is thought to reduce inequality, but at what cost? Take the case of the Soviet Union. The state-controlled industries were often inefficient and lacked innovation. In 1989, the Soviet economy was producing fewer goods, leading to shortages. People had to wait in long lines just to buy basic items like bread and soap. This is the downside of a centrally planned economy. Without competition, there's little incentive for businesses to improve or innovate. In contrast, the mixed economic model in China has shown some success. After decades of strict socialist policies, China's government began opening up to private business in the late 20th century. Today, China's rapid economic growth is partly due to this shift, though the state still controls crucial sectors like energy and telecommunications. The country's economic success has lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, but it hasn't entirely embraced the socialist ideal. On the other hand, North Korea remains one of the most extreme examples of a planned socialist economy. Here, the government controls nearly every aspect of the economy. However, the result has been stagnation and poverty. According to the World Bank, North Korea's GDP per capita is less than $1,500, a fraction of the South Korean economy's $35,000 per capita. These differences show just how hard it is to make a state-controlled economy work in today's globalized world. The question remains, can socialism be a successful economic system? Some argue that social safety nets are necessary for a healthy society, but the lack of private sector growth often leads to inefficiency. Economists debate whether full state control stifles the growth needed for a nation to thrive. In the end, it seems that a balance between state control and private enterprise might be the answer. Chapter 3: Dictators in Disguise. Power plays under the red flag. One of the most unsettling aspects of socialist experiments has been the rise of authoritarianism. Socialism, at its core, calls for the empowerment of the people, but in practice, many socialist governments have created dictatorships. The tension between the promise of freedom and the reality of control has been a repeating theme. Take the Soviet Union again. While it began with the idealistic vision of a workers' paradise, it quickly became an authoritarian regime under Joseph Stalin. The promise of equality was overshadowed by the rise of the secret police, mass purges, and forced labor camps. Stalin's reign caused the deaths of millions, all in the name of building socialism. In 1932, during the Holodomor famine in Ukraine, millions died as a result of government policies that prioritized state control over the welfare of its citizens. Similarly, in Cuba, while Fidel Castro promised social justice, his government did not tolerate political dissent. Opposition was often met with imprisonment, and free speech was suppressed. The Castros implemented a one-party system that limited freedoms and political rights, undermining the very ideals they swore to uphold. In Venezuela, Hugo Chavez promised to create a fairer society for the poor by nationalizing industries and redistributing wealth. However, his government's tight control over the media and the military soon raised alarms. By the time Nicolas Maduro took power, Venezuela was facing economic collapse, while the government maintained strict power over the people. Interestingly, some socialist leaders, such as Chile's Salvador Allende, attempted to create a socialist government through democratic means. But even in these cases, the threat of foreign intervention and political instability led to tragic outcomes. Allende was overthrown in a coup, marking a tragic end to a peaceful socialist experiment. Why does this happen? It seems that the concentration of power in the hands of the state often leads to authoritarianism. The justification is usually for the greater good, controlling the economy and society to ensure equality. However, history has shown that once power is centralized, it is incredibly hard to distribute it back to the people. And often, it never truly leaves the hands of those in power. In the end, many socialist experiments became less about empowering the people and more about consolidating power. The lesson here is clear: the path to socialism is full of temptations for leaders to seize absolute control, leaving the original ideals in the dust. Don't forget to subscribe for more on the complexities of socialism and what went wrong in these experiments. Click the bell to stay updated on future chapters. Chapter 4: The People's Voice. Socialism's struggle with freedom. One of the greatest challenges socialism faces is balancing equality with individual freedoms. At first glance, socialism seems to promise a society where the people's needs are placed above personal gain. But, as history has shown, socialist governments often restrict individual liberties to maintain control. The question remains, can socialism truly work without sacrificing freedom? In socialist countries, the focus is usually on collective good. The government often takes a central role in ensuring everyone's basic needs are met. But this can clash with the idea of free expression and free markets. For example, in the Soviet Union, the government controlled not only the economy but also the media, arts, and education. The state enforced a strict narrative, limiting what people could say, write, or even think. Dissidents were punished, sometimes with imprisonment or worse. Cuba, too, faced similar issues. While the Cuban government provided universal healthcare and education, it also placed tight restrictions on freedom of speech. Independent journalists and activists who criticized the regime were often silenced. This contradiction between socialist ideals and personal freedoms is something many socialist governments struggle with. It's hard to imagine a truly free society when the state controls so much of everyday life. On the other hand, some socialist-inspired countries have managed to preserve democratic elements. Countries like Norway and Finland, which blend socialism with democracy, ensure that citizens have both social security and the freedom to voice their opinions. These nations show that socialism doesn't have to mean the suppression of rights. Still, the balance remains delicate. As wealth inequality grows, people often question whether the government will prioritize democracy or economic control. The truth is, maintaining both equality and freedom is a difficult feat. Many socialist regimes have shown that the promise of a utopia often comes at the cost of basic freedoms. However, more modern socialist models, like those in the Nordic countries, have worked hard to keep this balance intact. These countries are proof that it's possible, but not easy. If you're interested in learning more about the struggles of balancing equality and freedom in socialist states, be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more insights. Chapter 5: Building Social Safety Nets, a Double-Edged Sword. One of the key selling points of socialism is its focus on social safety nets. Universal healthcare, free education, and unemployment benefits are often at the heart of socialist promises. These systems aim to ensure that no one is left behind. But are these safety nets sustainable in the long term? In Sweden, healthcare is free for all citizens, and education, including university, is also free. In fact, the Swedish government spends around 11% of its GDP on public health services. While this has led to higher life expectancy and a high standard of living, it also means that taxes are high. Swedes pay some of the highest taxes in the world. The question is, are these services sustainable as populations age and costs rise? Similarly, in the UK, the National Health Service, NHS, offers free healthcare at the point of use. It's a system admired worldwide, but it faces constant challenges. Funding cuts and long wait times have led to frustrations among citizens, and the NHS struggles with rising demand and an aging population. While it provides universal access, it's not without its flaws. In contrast, some countries with more capitalist economies, like the United States, have been reluctant to embrace universal healthcare, arguing that it's too expensive. The US spends more on healthcare than any other country, yet tens of millions of Americans remain uninsured. The debate continues: can universal healthcare be both affordable and high quality? Yet, there are countries like Canada that manage a relatively successful single-payer healthcare system, despite challenges. While waiting times can be long for certain services, the system offers an affordable, accessible healthcare model to its citizens. It's clear that a strong social safety net can improve quality of life, but its success often depends on the economy's health and the government's ability to manage costs effectively. The lesson here is that social safety nets are vital for a fair society, but they require careful management. If not maintained properly, they can strain the economy and result in higher taxes, or worse, reduced services. A successful safety net needs a strong, sustainable economy to support it. Chapter 6: Lessons from the Ashes, What's Next for Socialism? After decades of trial and error, what's next for socialism? It's clear that the socialist dream has been tried in many different forms. Some experiments, like the Soviet Union and Maoist China, ended in failure. Others, like the Nordic model, are still thriving, proving that socialism can work when adapted to a modern context. So, what lessons can be learned from the ashes of past experiments? One of the key lessons is the importance of economic flexibility. Countries that have mixed market economies, such as Germany and Canada, have been able to adapt socialism's core ideas to a capitalist framework. This allows them to provide strong social services while maintaining a competitive economy. The future of socialism may lie in this blend of government intervention and free market principles. Another lesson is the need for democracy. As history has shown, socialism's ideal of equality can often lead to authoritarianism. The Soviet Union, Cuba, and North Korea all demonstrate that power can easily be concentrated in the hands of the few. If socialism is to survive, it must embrace democratic practices. It must empower the people, not just the state. The third lesson is that sustainability matters. Many socialist experiments failed because they were economically unsustainable. Whether it's the collapse of the Soviet Union due to economic inefficiency or Venezuela's ongoing crisis due to government mismanagement, sustainability is key. Future socialist systems will need to find a balance between social benefits and economic viability. In some ways, the future of socialism lies in adapting to today's globalized world. With technology and automation changing economies, some believe socialism could play a role in providing a fairer distribution of wealth. Universal basic income, for example, has been proposed as a way to ensure that everyone benefits from the wealth created by automation. Ultimately, socialism is not dead, but it's evolving. It's no longer just about revolution and the overthrow of capitalist systems. The future may lie in reforming and modernizing socialist principles to create systems that promote equality and sustainability, while still protecting individual freedoms. The lessons learned from past failures can help guide this evolution, ensuring that socialism, if adapted wisely, may have a place in the future. Thanks for watching. If you want more thought-provoking insights on socialism's future and its impact on the world, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications.